Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Uncle Mad. It is time. We've been teasing this for a couple weeks now. Today, I'm giving you my Nashville SC 2024 season preview. But before we get into that, I was in the neighborhood, so I decided to pop over to Geodis Park, pop into the team store ahead of the match day coming up this Sunday, if you're watching this video when it's released. See if there's any new items, see how things are going with the 615 kit sale. We'll pop in, check out. I also want to see if I can get the patches, because they told us at the kit release party, eventually they were going to sell the separate patches, the neighborhood patches, separate from the jersey. So I wanted to check in, see if that's available yet or not, and just see if they have any new items that might be interesting ahead of the match day, because I'm sure first match Sunday, it'll be a mob scene in the team store. So get a head start on that, check out what's going on, and then we'll head home and we'll jump in. We'll tell you what's going to happen. Well, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen in 2024 for Nashville SC. I will be very wrong. Interesting to know, you can go ahead and pick up the season opener patch in advance of the game if anybody's interested in something like that. This is a women's sweatshirt here, but I like this design where it's kind of like the old collegiate looking designs. Got these Tempo Squishmallows. I don't get these. Squishmallow things are popular. I don't get it though. It may have missed me. Kit grows on me the more I see it. I feel like looking at my United jersey from this year, and like the undersleeve and everything looks somewhat similar. I'll definitely end up picking up one of these at some point in time. Just not exactly sure when or where from or what style. All right, so right out of the gates, I will report the patches, neighborhood patches. They are available for purchase outside of purchasing the jersey. You can see there, I got Hermitage. This one's for me. And I picked up a Mount Juliet for Nephew P. I'll probably end up buying like 7 of these before the season's over, because I have lived all across Nashville, and so I've got a lot of areas that I can represent from the city. So yeah, these were cool. These were like $6.50 a piece, I think, which was, I thought they were going to be about $10-15, but $6.50 a piece. They look like they're just kind of your standard iron-on patches that you can add to anything yourself. So it's good to know. Decent crowd in the team store today. A little bit, I guess, shouldn't be too surprising. It's the first day the team store has been open since the kit launch on Saturday, I believe. So a lot of people getting the jersey. Looked like a few people exchanging. Maybe they got the wrong size or bringing theirs in to get the customization if it was too busy to get them customized on Saturday. So people are hyped. People are getting ready. The season starts Sunday. Well, MLS season starts Sunday, but we've got a brand new competition that we're going to be participating in that we've never been in before, which we'll also talk about. But we're going to go home to the home studio to break it all down and share what we think is going to happen. The great we. When I'm talking about we, I mean, of course, me. 2024 season preview. Take it away back in the studio, Uncle Mad.
Okay. It's time to talk the 2024 Nashville SC / MLS season. As we speak, I am currently watching the Miami Real Salt Lake kickoff match for the MLS season. While we're sitting here recording, do want to point out, while I record, I'm also going to be publishing this to my podcast feed. The Uncle Mad podcast can be found wherever you find podcasts. So if you prefer to listen to my rambling, incoherent thoughts in audio form as opposed to watching the video on YouTube, you can do so there. Subscribe wherever you're watching, wherever you're enjoying this content. Give it a thumbs up, like it. That always helps the channel be found by more people who are like-minded and like the same things that we all do here. We're here today to talk a little bit about Nashville SC, a lot about Nashville SC, and a little bit about the MLS season in general. Give our thoughts. The 2024 season is starting this weekend for Nashville SC. The full campaign starts tomorrow. At the time of recording, it is Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. Nashville SC is currently in the Dominican Republic to take on Mocha in their first ever CONCACAF, it's going to be hard to say this, CONCACAF Champions Cup match. No more CONCACAF Champions League. That just rolled off the tongue so much better than CONCACAF Champions Cup. Maybe call it like the Triple C. 3 C's. I don't know. There's got to be a better way to say that, because it always is going to feel like I want to say CONCACAF Champions Cup. But that's what it is. I just got it right. Holy crap, I was trying to say the original one and now I've fully switched over. But it's exciting. Nashville SC in their first ever kind of full-on continental competition. Obviously, big thing last year was Leagues Cup, the kind of semi-domestic, semi-continental, but it was just between Liga MX and MLS. This year we've got the full-on all of CONCACAF involved. Obviously we're going down to take on a team from the Dominican Republic, so that's an exciting thing for Nashville SC. Looking forward to that match tomorrow. But the MLS season proper for Nashville SC begins Sunday with Red Bull New York. It's been a weird mix of quiet and somewhat notable for Nashville SC. I was very curious heading into the offseason if this would be the season we saw big changes, major overhauls to the team, but it seems for the most part Mike Jacobs, Gary Smith, and co. decided the best course of action was to kind of run it back one more season with kind of the core group of players that have been a part of this team since the first MLS season, with one, big notable exception, obviously the original club captain, leader, key player in midfield for the first, era of Nashville SC, Dax McCarty, departed to Atlanta. Shared my thoughts previously on that on a previous live stream. I think Dax was a little upset the way it went down, but I think it was kind of in reality, more of a par standard of the course way things happen. Especially a player like Dax, who's host a podcast called the Journeyman Podcast because he and his co-host have bounced all around the league. I was a little bit surprised by how bitter he was about the departure, just because he feels like somebody that should kind of know the routine, know the deal at this point in time in his career. But miss him, would have preferred him to be back for another season, just because, when he was fit, when he was at his best, when he was able to give his best to the team, he was still, contributing at a fairly high level, still kind of one of the few players in Nashville SC's team that could really play those key forward passes, break lines, create opportunities from midfield. A lot of everything else was kind of crosses or passes into Henny Mukhtar's feet and hoping for the best. So we'll see what happens there. But we'll kind of talk about what Nashville SC might be doing to try and compensate for that departure. I guess the best way to counter that is to talk about who's come in. What are the new players? Who have we brought in? I got the roster in front of me right here, so we'll kind of go player by player. I'm going numerical order here. So Amar Sejic, I probably mispronounced that, but midfielder, a lot of MLS experience has come in. I think he's probably looked at as being that kind of change of pace off the bench player that we kind of thought we maybe were going to have in Jean Grey Goose last year, and just for whatever reason he never seemed to get fully integrated, never was fully brought in by Gary Smith. But Amar Sejic, that's kind of his reputation, is he's kind of a hybrid 6'8" who can make some passes, do some things from there. Wouldn't expect him to be penciled in as a starter, but like I said, he could be that Grey Goose, possibly an upgrade over Nunga as that next, central midfielder off the bench that you want to bring in if you need an extra bit of passing, an extra bit of control in midfield. Next other signing, probably the biggest one, probably the key one, probably the one we need the most out of this season, Tyler Boyd, a long-time MLS player. He's been with Galaxy most recently. Tyler Boyd's been on my radar for a long time because I feel like he was a player, and I'm sure everybody has these players that they're familiar with if you've played FIFA for years. There's players where, either you play with the national team and they're listed as like a high-rated player, but you're like, I don't ever see them getting called into the national team in real life. This is weird. But they're more rated on FIFA, so you call them into the national team when you're managing the national team. Tyler Boyd's that dude. I feel like he's been around as a 73, 74 range ranked winger for the U.S. national team at points in time. So I've brought him in to my FIFA national teams, but he doesn't get as much love, much call-ins from the full national team in real life as I give him in FIFA. So it's one of those things where, maybe somewhere along the way, I don't really know how FIFA calculates their ratings at all times. But, he's been a solid MLS player, all things, good reputation for him coming in. What I like about him, what I like about bringing him into the team is I think, he gives us something different from a wing perspective than we got for Fafa Bako. In a perfect world, both players would be on the team, but, that's just, probably not possible with the MLS roster restrictions. But Tyler Boyd, he's got a little bit of pace, but he's a little bit more of a creative dribbler. He's a little bit more, he'll tuck inside sometimes, kind of almost be like a 10 at times. And I think he probably is a little bit more consistent of a goal scorer than Fafa Bako is, which is, saying something, because Fafa Bako, I believe, was our second leading goal scorer last season. So, I like that signing. If he can stay healthy, if he can come in, if he can contribute, if he can kind of give us a little bit more of a dynamic presence than, Fafa Bako, good player, solid player, like I said, would have loved to have him back. But, he's mostly speedy winger who's just trying to beat people with pace. I think Tyler Boyd has a little bit more in his game overall than Bako did. So I think in that regard, he's an upgrade, and he's a guy that I think we have to be hopeful gives us a lot this season for us to take a step forward. Is he a signing that really is going to do that? That's kind of one of the big questions for Nashville SC this season. Going down the list more, Joey Skinner, he's listed on the first team. I believe he's a former draft pick of ours who maybe played a little bit for Huntsville last year, and now he's going to maybe get a chance to push his way into the first team a little bit more, push Taylor Washington for that backup left back spot. Drew Yearwood, probably the second biggest signing we had this offseason, a former young designated player for Red Bull New York. We have to sign at least one Red Bull New York player every season, so he fit that quota this year. He's one who kind of fits a unique spot, at least in my brain. What I'm hoping we see from him is one thing that I think Mike Jacobs has done a really good job of, and credit to Gary Smith, they probably worked together on this to a certain degree, is identifying players who, for whatever reason, weren't as successful at their previous club and saying this is a player we can bring in, use their skill set a little differently, maybe get something different out of them than what they got previously. I'm thinking of like the Jacob Schaffelbergs, the Lucas McNaughtons, even to a certain extent the Wheels of the world, players who come in, weren't, top tier players at the previous club, weren't, living up to their expectations. In certain cases, I think like in case of like McNaughton and like Schaffelberg, like Toronto FC fans were like, thank goodness, thank you for taking this player off our hands. And they turned out to be pretty solid for us. So I'm hoping that's where Drew Yearwood comes in. His reputation is that he's more of an 8, which we really haven't signed. We've mostly stuck with like pure number 6s, Dax, Godoy, Sean Davis, Anunga. Midfield, we've been overloaded with like 6s and never really had a true number 8. He can maybe be that. That the question is, can he bring anywhere close to the passing range that we got from Dax? And it's kind of a mixed bag from what you read in certain reports. Some people think he can, and just the style of play they played in New York with the high pressing never gave him the chance to do that, and that's another reason people think he can maybe be a good fit. Ooh, Real Salt Lake, pressure on. Good clearance for Real, or good pressure from Real Salt Lake, but Miami gets the clearance. I'm doing live commentary on a game that everybody will have seen and watched by the point in time this all comes out. Sorry. There's high expectations or high hopes for him. At best, at bottom ceiling for him, he's definitely an upgrade over Brian Anunga as a player that can come off the bench and give us a little something else. Top ceiling, he's potentially a solid player that we can plug in for the next 3 to 4 years to give us some creativity and some speed and some pace and a little bit of a youth, a little bit more energy in midfield than what we've had, because you look at what we got Sean Davis 30, Godoy over 30, Dax McCarty over 30. I say this as a man in my mid-30s. I hate calling the people of that age old, but MLS, soccer, professional sports standards, it is what it is. But that's an if. I think the big thing is there's a lot of ifs about this team, about the moves we made, and he's another one. Like, can he come in, be a change to what we've had in midfield previously? I think so. We'll see what happens. Early yellow card, early free kick for Inter Miami. Once again, commentary on a match that's going to already have happened by the time it's released. But I will take this opportunity because it's a yellow card. It's a free kick for Messi in what's his most dangerous situation spots. Notably, obviously one of the big stories going to MLS this season, jumping ahead to our MLS preview, the pro referees are locked out, could not come to a CBA agreement with MLS for this season yet. So we are having essentially replacement refs, which some are refs who have done high-level college, maybe some low-level professional games, but, there's a handful of pro refs who are still in who had not worked MLS previously, so they're allowed to, quote-unquote, cross the picket line. But right at the gates, first thing I noticed when I was starting this match was they are in the traditional USSF referee kits that I wear. I'm a referee myself, so when I go out to referee high school games, youth games around the area, that's the kit I wear. But normally MLS pro refs have their own exclusive kit that is just for MLS. So right out of the gates, you're seeing very obviously these are not your traditional refs. Haven't noticed anything in the first few minutes of the game that really calls out anything different, anything unusual. It'll be really interesting to see how these first week, however long this lockout goes, if there are any major issues with these replacement refs. Because there's always the chance these refs come in and do a better job than pro. I know a lot of people haven't always been happy with the performance of pro referees. I'm always going to err on the side of my guys, my fellow fourth team members, and give them a little bit of leeway. And I'm probably a little bit different from most fans in that regard, but sidetrack there. Apologies. Let's get back to the roster. Where are we at? Next new player, Mackenzie Gaines, brought in a new winger. I think the biggest thing I would say for Mackenzie Gaines is I like the signing of him because he's essentially not being brought in to be like a key, starter. I don't think they're expecting him to be a major impact player. He's essentially a replacement for Luke Hawkinson. And that's something that, Mike Jacobs, he's done several interviews this offseason, preseason, talking about the biggest thing they wanted to do was get younger, get faster, and improve their depth. And that's exactly the type of signing Mackenzie Gaines is because, is he going to elevate our first 11? No. Is he a huge upgrade over Luke Hawkinson as an option you can bring in off the bench late in the game when you're trying to find a way to get a goal? Yes. Huge upgrade in that regard. And in a season where we're going to have the added schedule congestion from CONCACAF Champions League, a player like that being the player you've got to come off the bench or to pick up a spot start here and there over Luke Hawkinson, huge upgrade. Love that signing for that regard. Once again, probably not somebody that's going to make a huge impact on the first 11, but need that type of player. Going through, who else? What are the new signings we got? Foster Ajago, I'm not really familiar with him, a forward. Didn't see much of him so far. I think he may end up being more of a Huntsville player. Julian Gaines, the younger brother of Mackenzie Gaines, I've also heard he's probably expected to play most of his time in Huntsville, but he does give us a actual potential backup right back, which we really haven't had since the departure of Eric Miller. So, if we need to bring him up for Huntsville, if there's an injury, God forbid, to Shaq Moore, the king of Nashville, wink, wink. But if he gets hurt, we need a more steady replacement right back. We've got, Julian Gaines who could potentially come up and be a consistent, replacement back up there. Brett Coleman, this guy, everybody flipped out about him after the preseason game that we actually got to go see just because his hairline, if you're watching live, I'm a fellow hairline brother with Brent. He got the nickname Dad from a lot of the fan base, I think because he just looks like an older gentleman out there playing on the field. Pretty good performance when he was on the field. He became kind of a quick fan favorite. Club signed him. He's got a decent amount of MLS experience. It seems like we just have a ton of center backs. I don't know if anybody's going to be departing or sent out. There's also rumors that Nick DePae is going to be re-signed when he's healthy and fully able to re-sign, which would give us, I believe, 6 first-team center backs potentially. I've seen speculation that's probably due to the fact that Walker Zimmerman, if he's healthy enough, may be called away for international duty over the summer with the Copa America tournament that's going to be here in America this summer. Also last year where he was dealing with so many injury issues, having another veteran presence in there if he continues to struggle with injuries is also going to be good. So one way or the other, extra cover for him there can't be a bad thing. Isaiah Jones is listed here, new homegrown signing, fresh, from the academy. We'll say, if you've never heard of the Jones family, look them up. It's a very interesting story. I've got quite a bit of experience with the Jones family because I coached a high school team that played a lot against the high school team that the Joneses basically propped up and made one of the better teams in the state. So it's crazy to see one of those kids from that family now making it all the way to being on MLS's, first team roster. He'll probably only play for Huntsville this year. I doubt he'll make any MLS appearances, but we'll see. His brother was a top 10 draft pick for New York City. It's crazy. That family's insane. Look him up. Google the Jones family, Franklin, Tennessee. It's a crazy story. Then the next one, Adem Sipic. He's not really a new signing, but he might find his way into the first team this year after kind of getting signed as a homegrown player last year and playing a lot for Huntsville. He may get a game here or there. U.S. Open Cup. We still don't know what's going on with that. I'll talk about that in a minute. Maybe some of these games where we need to rest players following a CONCACAF Champions Cup match. Who knows? He could find his way into the first team. I think he's probably a year ahead of where Isaiah Jones will be. So Isaiah Jones getting a lot of Huntsville minutes. Maybe coming into the first team next year. I could see Sipic kind of almost being in the Zubac spot because we let Zubac go, our third striker. Somebody's got to fill that role. The other player, new signing that we just signed from Canada, Woobens Pacius. Show me your Woobs, I know is the big joke with him. Somebody has to be the third striker. There has to be, between Sam Surich and Teal Bunbury, there has to be just at least one more striker somewhere in your squad that you're looking to if you need that third striker. So it's either going to be Sipic or Woobens. I've heard both are likely to play a lot for Huntsville. So who comes in and is actually the third choice striker for the full first team Nashville SC? That'll be interesting to watch. That kind of covers those two players in both regards. So just looking at the roster as a whole, kind of looking at the offseason, what does it do for us for next season? Obviously, the big thing is there's no huge, significant, knock it out of the park signing that upgrades the team. I think, if you're a Nashville SC fan, if you're Mike Jacobs, if you're Gary Smith, you're hoping you're going to get that from Sam Surridge, because we signed him, last summer, somewhat late in the transfer window, probably not as early as we would have liked to. Saw flashes of what we were hoping to see out of him at certain points, especially during Leagues Cup. He came out of that tournament with some injuries and never fully got back up to full form. But, now he's had an offseason to rest and recover. He's had a full preseason with the team to be fully integrated. If he comes in and has, the impact we hope he has, that could be huge for this team. He could be like, I always hate the phrase, he's basically going to be like a new signing. But in a lot of ways, I think that's got to be what Nashville SC is hoping for, at least for the first half of the season. Because, like with Sam Surridge last year, like with Shaq Moore 2 years ago, like with Ake Loba, which didn't work out a couple years ago, Nashville SC has always tended to make their big signings in the summer. And that's kind of par for the course for MLS, because it's easier in the summer, because that's the off season for the rest of the world. So you could make the case, we have to hope Sam Surridge essentially comes in and is basically like a new signing, for Nashville SC, because this is going to be the chance to show why we signed him. Can he be what he's supposed to be? Because if you get 10, 15 goals out of Sam Surridge, and we get the old Hani Mukhtar that we saw the first half of last season and most of his MLS career back too, 10 plus goals from Sam Surridge, 10 plus goals for Hani Mukhtar, I like the sound of that. That would work out pretty well for me. But in talking about the ifs, the possibilities, what does Sam Surridge give us, kind of leads into like the bigger picture, what I see for Nashville SC this season. I see potential for a good season, potential for, certainly better than what we saw last season. But right now, it's largely based on ifs, on hopes, on if this happens, we'll be fine. If this happens, we'll be good. So that's not necessarily what it be. You'd like to have a little bit more certainty. Obviously, I think that's why a lot of the procrastinators, a lot of the preseason predictions have us dropping, down and outside of the top 9, out of the playoff picture. 10th, 11th is where I've seen us in a lot of people's preseason predictions, preseason power rankings. I would be shocked, just because we've been pretty consistent. If you can say what you will about Gary Smith and his style of play, but he's consistent. He gets consistent, solid performances, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think the whole Gary ball, park the bus thing's a little blown out of proportion, if I'm being honest. But we do need some things to come together that are kind of right now hopeful aspirations to really keep us where we're at and push us to the next stage. I think the biggest concern for Nashville SC is not anything necessarily with Nashville SC. It's that a lot of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, on paper at least, got a lot better this offseason. Like New York Red Bulls, they're a team who needed a miracle bailout from MLS. Wink. Against Nashville SC at the end of last season to even get into the playoffs, to keep their long playoff streak alive, to keep a major media market into the playoffs for the first season we were going to be on Apple TV. But they're much better. They signed Emil Forsberg, one of the key signings in the offseason in the MLS, in my opinion. New York City, the other New York team, is going to be better than they were last year. Just go across the board, outside of like Toronto, DC, and maybe Charlotte, the East is going to be really, really, really tough. A lot tougher than it has been the last couple years. And I think that's probably the biggest detriment, that's the biggest negative people have on Nashville SC, is that it's not anything Nashville SC did, it's what everybody else around them has done. But, like I said, if Drew Yearwood can come in and give us a little bit of a different presence, a different dynamic in central midfield, if Hani Mukhtar gets back to 2022 Hani Mukhtar, early 2023 Hani Mukhtar, if Sam Surridge can score double-digit goals and continue to be a threat alongside Hani Mukhtar, things can be pretty good. Because I think when people were looking at Nashville SC, I think the kind of bitter, sour taste the end of the season left in people's mouth is what they're thinking about. If you go back to last season, I actually went back and looked at this just because I wanted to for once. I actually have a little solid information, a little bit informed in my brain before I kind of just rambled on. At the end of June of last season, we were 10-5 5-5, and also had a 10-game unbeaten streak in that period of time. And this is when we had CJ Sapong as our starting striker, who did not score a single goal for Nashville SC during that stretch. Eventually got traded to Toronto as a part of the McNaughton deal. Scored a goal in his first game for Toronto after not scoring for like almost a calendar year for Nashville SC. And then I don't know if he ever scored again for Toronto. But so we were 10-5-5 with our starting striker never scoring. So, I mean, I'm looking at that, and, if we can continue to be a solid defensive team, which we've always been under Gary Smith, and we suddenly can get goals from our striker and goals from our MVP caliber player, Hani Mukhtar, maybe some goals from this new signing we have in Tyler Boyd, I mean, that could be a huge step forward. That could be a very different Nashville SC team. That could be back to the Nashville SC of 2021, 2022, when we were like really kind of knocking on the door of the top of the Eastern Conference. But once again, like I said, it's a lot of ifs. If we're in the mix and we can find like a major upgrade at center mid, like that real key line breaking, chance creating central midfielder that we really need. I mean, perfect world, Drew Yearwood comes good and turns out to be that player. But if we're in the mix and we're consistent and we get to that summer window where we've made our big signings and can find that type of player if we need to, we could be right there in the mix. I don't think overall we have enough talent to really be like a true contender for Supporters Shield. We've knocked on the door of that a few times in Nashville SC's history, but I think there's so many ifs, it's too hard to say that we could maybe like get into that mix. But I think if things go the way we want them to, we can be in the top 3, top 4 conversation and potentially be setting ourselves up for a good run in MLS Cup. But, Sam Surridge could also be the next Aki Loba and not score any goals. Hani Mukhtar could leave in June to go to Qatar. Drew Yearwood could be Brian Anuga 2.0 and just be a guy who runs around and works really hard but doesn't really give you much. And then things could really fall apart. I've seen a lot of people talk about, Gary Smith being a coach who's on the hot seat this season. And I mean, I don't think he's on the hot seat from the perspective of the performances. I think the club is happy with what he's done. But I do think this is it has to be the make or break season for the team as a whole. Like, this has to be kind of the final big push from this first generation of Nashville SC, whether it's Hani Mukhtar going to Qatar, whether it's, veteran players like Godoy, Leal, Sean Davis, maybe even Walker Zimmerman, Joe Willis possibly being gone after the season. I think there's going to be a very different Nashville SC in 2025, and if this season was far below expectations, far below what the goals of the club ultimately were, whether you're happy with the early, 4 straight playoff appearances, potentially a 5th this season from Gary Smith, it might be time to make a change, just because if you're going to change the squad so much as like they're likely to have to, it might be time to change the manager as well. But I would be shocked to see, unless it just completely falls apart, unless the season is just a complete disaster, I would be shocked to see a mid-season change. Because everything I've heard from Mike Jacobs, like the interviews and stuff I've seen from him, I actually got to see him very early on in the Nashville SC days do it kind of like a speaking appearance with like the boosters at Lipscomb University. And it was like 20 people, so it was kind of like an open Q&A, just kind of an informal talk thing. It was a lot more laid back than what you would see him in like interview settings, and like it was really interesting to hear his philosophy on stuff in that situation. It's always stuck with me. Like, one of the key things he said was, for roster building, he always wants to keep at least, and this was kind of weird, but it made so much sense, was he wanted to keep the languages that are spoke within the team to only like 3 to 4 languages spoke. Because if you get too many people that aren't speaking the language of everybody else, it's hard to communicate, it's hard to get everybody on the same page. And that was honestly something that people said about like Rodrigo Pinheiro and Ake Lobas. They didn't speak the language that everybody else was speaking, and it was hard for them to figure out exactly what they're supposed to do, hard for them to always understand the instructions from Gary Smith. So he said he always wanted, if we got Spanish speakers, I want at least 3 Spanish speakers. If we got French speakers, I want 3 or 4 Spanish or French speakers. Just want there to be, if you can't directly communicate with the coach, want there to be players that you can communicate to, where there's ways everybody can always understand and be on the same page. And when he said that, I was like, this is so interesting to me, because like I've always wondered that, like when, following European soccer where you've got players from, 23 players from like 12 different countries, how do they get on the same page? Because it's hard enough, like in my experience coaching high school boys soccer where everybody speaks English, to get those dummies to understand the stuff we're trying to tell them. So if like half your team doesn't speak the same language as you as a coach, how does that work? So that was interesting to me, a little side tangent there, but I think he's got that vibe if he wants consistency. I mean, we've seen he hasn't made major changes, major overhauls to the squad that you often see in MLS. So to me, he wants consistency. He wants to keep things on track. So like I said, unless Gary just, does something insane or the whole team just falls apart, I don't see a mid-season firing, but I could definitely see a change of the guard, post 2024 if it comes to that. I'm hopeful, but I'm always kind of on the optimistic side. When I previewed the 2023 Titan season, I think I somehow worked out a plan where they were going to go 13-3 or something crazy like that. So unfortunately, I am a little bit more optimistic side than I probably often should be, but I like my chances for Nashville SC this season. Like, I think Sam Surge is going to have a good season. I think that's going to be a key thing for us, because if we're still, top 3 defense in the league and suddenly we have 2 double-digit goal scorers, potentially 3 depending on what you get out of Tyler Boyd, but that seems a little less likely. I think it can be a good season. I don't think we're going to be chasing Supporter Shield, but I think when a season where we're coming in, like probably the lowest expectations we've had since the first season, I think we have a chance to surprise some people. Like, obviously, like I said, the big concern is how much improved the rest of the Eastern Conference is. Can we keep up with them? I think Nashville SC could finish, 5, 4, 6, somewhere in that range is probably where I would expect them to finish based on my kind of gut feeling, but can also see why a lot of people are having us falling out of the playoff picture and falling out of that window and down into like the 10-11 range. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, we'll start Sunday with Red Bull New York. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm probably going to do a live stream Friday night on my YouTube channel to kind of break down that game a little bit more, as much as I can. Obviously, we have our first game in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, like I mentioned, against Mocha. At the time of recording, that's going to be tomorrow night. I'm scheduled to referee a high school game. I don't know if I mentioned this yet. I'm a referee. I'm scheduled to referee a high school game tomorrow night, so I might be watching that on tape delay. But if the game gets canceled, because we're supposed to have thunderstorms in Nashville tomorrow, if my reffing game gets canceled, I might do a live watch-along for that. So if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to the podcast, head over to my YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed. The bell turns on for notifications, because if I do those live streams coming up, you'll get alerted so you can tune in, join in the chat, have some fun with us. Some quick thoughts just on the MLS season as a whole. Like, one thing I don't think I've done a very good job as a fan is I've wanted to like get more fully up to speed, fully, understanding of the rest of the MLS. I want to like be like I don't want to just be a Nashville SC fan. I want to like know the league. I want to know the other teams. I want to have like a better understanding of who we play against. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, I think I got better last season being able to watch more on Apple TV. But even then, I wasn't able to watch as much more as I thought I would, because they did this thing where like all the games kicked off at the same time. So anytime I was watching Nashville SC, everybody else was also playing, so I never got to watch much of any other teams. But I think I've made baby steps into having a better understanding of the league as a whole, but there's still probably at least 6 or 7 teams I couldn't name a single player on. So I can't, in good conscience, tell you what I think is going to happen overall in the season. I'm a fan. Like, I'm not like one of the people who's like doing deep dives, watching all the tapes, studying all the film, watching through the full season, and watching every game and knowing every player on every roster. I trust people who are smarter than me to do that, and I listen to them. Club and Country USA podcast, Speedway Soccer, all the guys over there, Paradise Pod. I'm probably gonna leave some out. Pharmaceutical Soccer, Chris Ivey. I'll shout him out specifically because he did a great thread today explaining the announced changes to the MLS roster rules, because MLS roster rules are by far the hardest thing to understand about MLS. Even reading through his thread, I felt like I picked up a few things, but there's just no way I can fully understand it. It's funny because I'm watching Miami, and they're the team that makes me the most confused about MLS roster rules. Not going to get into that too deeply, but he get a great thing of it. He's like great for that kind of stuff. You know, all those guys, Ben Wright, Valere, that guy, he's just started a new YouTube series where he's getting to do kind of almost like podcasts, you know, long form one-on-one interviews with Nashville SC players, which is something we have not seen really in the history of the club. We've gotten like a few little, you know, quick like 20-minute bites with some players here and there, but you know, he released today like a 40-minute interview with Jack Marr, which was awesome, getting to hear that much in-depth, detailed discussion about his journey and his place in Nashville SC. So, goal for Inter Miami. Robert Taylor, the unsung hero of Inter Miami. Yeah, every time I watched Inter Miami last year, even after Messi came in, I was like, this dude's the guy. Like, and I was like, I was almost hoping like they'd sign so many superstars from around the world that Robert Taylor would have to go, and like maybe Nashville SC could have stolen Robert Taylor, but I believe they are officially roster compliant and no longer have to dump any players, at least for now. But I mean, obviously they're the big story of the season for MLS. If you're talking about the MLS season, they're the one you have to like kind of focus on. And like some people will be annoyed by it and kind of get a little sick of it. But I mean, it's the best player in the world, arguably the best player of all time, coming to play in MLS, in Lionel Messi. You can complain about it, get annoyed about it, but you can't deny it. I mean, it's just true. And we saw, especially early on, the impact he made. You know, he fizzled a little bit down the stretch due to injuries and just fatigue. Same for him as Sam Surridge, honestly. Like, you know, he's had an off season, he's had a preseason, although you could argue the crazy preseason Inter Miami did, traveling all over the world, maybe wasn't the best idea, but it's a long season. They got plenty of time to recover from that. Just if they come out of that a little fatigued, don't start the season so well, not the end of the world for them. Although they're starting pretty well now. They're up 1-0 over Real Salt Lake early in the first half of this game. But to me, that's the question is, you know, they've got probably, unquestionably, the most talented roster in MLS, but can they hold up for the whole season? Because it's a lot of veteran players, a lot of players with a lot of wear and tear on their legs, like Luis Suarez. You know, there's been a lot of talk about, like, he can't play more than, like, 2 or 3 games in a month because his knees are so bad at this point in time. So it'll be interesting. That's kind of the key to me. Like, obviously, they have the most talented roster. I mean, like, you've got the best player in the world, probably the best player in the history of soccer. That's going to skew the numbers a little bit in terms of how talented your roster is, but can they hold up over the course of this insanely long, crazy MLS season we're about to be starting out on? Because you've got this, they've got CONCACAF Champions Cup, we've got Leagues Cup. The big question, and I had a whole rant in my head about this, but I'm going to try to curtail it and not just go off on a tangent. But the U.S. Open Cup drama has continued. If you're not familiar, it was announced late last year that MLS intended to field their reserve teams, not their first teams, in U.S. Open Cup, which is a tournament that's open to essentially every team in U.S. soccer, you know, pro teams of MLS level, USL, USL2, USL3, even like semi-pro amateur level adult teams have a chance. They start very low. It'd be hard for them to get up to the later rounds of it, but everybody basically has a chance. It's like, if you're familiar with European soccer, it's like the FA Cup. MLS didn't want to play in it because there's too much schedule congestion as it is, which they kind of created with the added Leagues Cup and the expansion of the playoffs. But also, like, the kind of underlying thing that people haven't talked about enough is that U.S. Soccer, who runs the U.S. Open Cup, kind of let the U.S. Open Cup get run into the ground. There's little to no revenue created by the U.S. Open Cup because they've not done anything to generate new TV deals, which is the main way you create revenue in sports. They haven't made the tournament seem special, seem like something that fans should attend. I've been to every single U.S. Open Cup match that Nashville SC has had, either at Nissan Stadium or Geodis Park, and they are 25% of the amount of people show up for those that show up for every other game, Leagues Cup included, which a lot of people thought Leagues Cup was just going to be a same as U.S. Open Cup, but those games were packed and pretty much sold out throughout, and U.S. Open Cup is never that way. So a lot of people blame, you know, MLS for the situation, and MLS probably could have handled it better. You know, probably could have just instructed the teams like, hey, rest your players if you need to. You don't have to like feel like you have to play your top 11 every match. But I don't know, I kind of put a little blame on U.S. Soccer for trying to take all the money, because like that's the other part of it, was they were collecting most of the revenue, which little revenue the thing generated, and not giving back much to the club, which you'd love everything to be sporting decisions. You'd love everybody to just be playing for the love of the game and playing to win the tournament, but sports at the professional level are driven by money. There's lower level USL 2 and 3 teams that are now pulling out of the US Open Cup because it's not financially viable for them to be in it if the MLS isn't a part of it and to generate the extra revenue that would be generated by MLS's presence. Reports now that there are only going to be 8 teams in the US Open Cup. I want the cup to happen. I've had a lot of fun going to those games. When we went up to Louisville for the away day for a US Open Cup match 2 years ago, one of my most fun experiences following Nashville SC. I want the cup to continue, but I do think US soccer, and I mean, they've been kind of terrible for a very long time, so I don't know why they're seemingly getting escape-free in this, but I think they should take a lot more of the blame in this situation than what they currently are taking. So, I mean, that's my thought on it. And there's people who are like, Don Garber out. Don Garber out. The MLS was on the verge of collapse when Don Garber came in. Teams were folding. Teams were collapsing. We were playing in football stadiums in front of like 2,500 people. Now we've got like multiple soccer-specific stadiums. Nashville SC would not exist if Don Garber was not the commissioner of MLS. So, I mean, once again, want things to happen, want to play for sporting reasons. Don Garber is good for the game. The growth of U.S. soccer. U.S. soccer, the federation, maybe not so much. All right, so I think there's only one more bit of content I wanted to discuss today, and I only have to do this because I feel like every other MLS content creator has done this. So I mean, I gotta follow suit. I mean, I gotta be part of the trend. I gotta do what everybody else is doing. We gotta do tiers / rankings for the new 2024 MLS kits. I will throw the visual up of my official tiers in front of you somewhere around here and just do a quick run through of them. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because they're jerseys. There's only so much you can say about them. So you can see here I've broken down mine into 5 tiers. I've got elite, I've got great, I've got good, I've got meh, and then I've got fart noise at the very bottom. So we'll start at the top. Elite, I've got Charlotte, Minnesota, Seattle. Charlotte, I haven't been impressed with their kits at all, so for them to do something kind of cool this year, use the mountain kind of skyline element there is very cool. Liked that a lot. It's definitely a kit I could see myself wearing if I was a fan of theirs. The Minnesota Space one, the first couple people I saw talking about it were really into it. It was a lot of popular right out of the gate. Then I saw some people kind of getting a little sour on it, like, oh, it looks more like a, minor league baseball alternate, jersey or something like that. But I'm like, get creative. The more teams get creative, as long as they don't kind of lose their, identity, I'm all for it. And then Seattle, like anything that's kind of like a clear throwback, clear tribute to the past that looks just clean and nice and not too busy, I'm always going to be able to do that. Seattle, like 2 years in a row, I think last year, along with Nashville's Man in Black kit, their Bruce Lee kit was the best kit last year. So 2 years in a row, they've kind of knocked it out of the park. The great tier, I got Chicago and DC right at one right after the other. These feel like the Chicago DC kits that they were wearing when I first started following MLS, lightly. I've only recently gotten more into MLS since we've gotten Nashville SC, but back, in the 2000s, the Beckham years when I first started watching the old school MLS days, this feels like that, but with a nice modern twist. They just look good. I like those. So they get the great rating. Philadelphia, I like this jersey because they've kind of found their pattern, their standard jersey look, but they've found ways to kind of reinvent it and, spice it up every year. Colorado, the next one right there, I'd say similar kind of thing. It's kind of their classic Colorado kit, but the way they kind of, that little subtle mountain design, I like that. I think that's a good kit. The blue and red kind of hybrid, one going into the other that Houston did here, like that a lot. It's a way to take, what could be, it's a hard kit, to do, they've kind of been standard kits for most of their time. Get a little creative with it. You don't have to go too crazy, just get a little creative. I like that. The Argyle look always plays for Kansas City. I like this one for their little darker color this year. It always works really well. Vancouver, it's like kind of a throwback. I do wonder, does MLS cap how many teams are allowed to do throwback stuff this year? Because I know there's some people from Nashville SC that were hoping we might get kind of a throwback to the early days of Nashville SC, because I believe this is, I don't want to speak out of turn here because a lot of the early Nashville SC days predate my following, but I think this was gonna be the 10-year anniversary. If it wasn't this year, it's gonna be next year or last year of the original starting of Nashville SC, the fan-based club that started and eventually became Nashville SC. But I wonder if there's like a cap that MLS puts on how many teams can do kind of throwback styles. But like this one, it doesn't look anything like a Vancouver jersey that I've ever seen before, but based on, their history, it's cool. I'm sure their fans are really happy to have that. The LA one, this is almost like a reverse like throwback, where this is like the old like sash kit that they used to have in the Beckham days, but it's got like the reverse sash where it's like some pattern that makes the white a little off-white in certain areas, and then the sash is just a pure white. Just a nice clean kit. Like, this is how to do a white kit. I'm gonna talk a lot about, because there's white kits that are just like no effort, no creativity down the line, so we'll get to those in a second. But this is kind of, if you got a white kit, like, LA can get away with it maybe more because that's their tradition, is to be the kind of Real Madrid kind of white kit team. But I like this one. Portland next up, they always figure out something kind of crazy, creative to do, playing off like the nature that always is part of their, MO for some reason. But yeah, another one where it's just kind of a nice looking kit. It's not too much going on, but it's a nice design and just kind of fun to look at. Then we go down to the good tier, and these are all fine, but they're not any that would like blow your mind or just like completely change the game. Orlando, once again, this is another one that I believe is a throwback to their days of being a USL team. It's got like their traditional past logo, some of the colors they used before there too. So I gave it a little respect for that. It's kind of bordering on meh just because these just plain white jerseys that don't do much I'm not a fan of, but with the throwback logo and some of the piping on the sleeves, I gave it a little bit more credit. The Real Salt Lake one was like the one where it's like the hardest for me to decide what to do with, because it's like borderline too much going on, a little bit too crazy looking, but I appreciate the effort of not just saying like, hey, let's just like put like a, whatever on the kit. Like they tried something, they tried to get a little creative, but tried to keep it as identifiable as a Real Salt Lake kit as they could. So I give them credit for not, they towed the line. It was on the verge of dropping down into meh. If they'd gone a little bit even two more, it could have gone down to fart noise, because it does have a lot going on, but I think they towed the line of making it a good jersey, but not just like too crazy. Nashville SC, this one could drop down into meh. I probably have it more in the good, just because if you see the full kit with like the yellow jerseys, and this is weird how soccer fan brains work. We're wearing blue shorts with our home kit for the first time ever, so we're going gold, blue, gold socks, like, and just like the full kit together looks so much better than just the jersey. The jersey by itself is just kind of as standard of a jersey as you could do with just adding a new little wrinkle of a blue stripe across the top. But with the full kit, that's what pushed it up from meh to good for me. New York, the Red Bull kit, it's kind of that same range as the Salt Lake kit, where it's like, I appreciate they try to do something a little bit different with the pattern, try to spice it up a little bit, but it's bordering on being a little too much, so that probably dropped it down into the good range. Next up, Columbus Crew, the Charlie Brown kit, as a lot of people have called it. I probably like it better than some people. Like a lot of people have hated it and put it in the bottom tier because it looks like Charlie Brown, but it's kind of the same boat as the Nashville SC kit. Maybe I'm thinking the same way because they're both kind of gold or yellow, but I say this a lot about, like, I was telling my buddy about this when I was talking about the Nashville SC kit. We're both Manchester United fans, and I told him we've probably learned from, the fact that European soccer has been on the forefront of putting out new jerseys every single year for a lot longer than American sports have, because they figured out somehow before we did that stupid fans will buy the new jersey every single year. So I'm honestly surprised the NFL hasn't got on that trend yet. Like, how NFL hasn't just like slightly tweaked the jerseys every single year to make a bunch of dumb fans pay $200 for new jerseys every single year. But soccer fans, we've fallen for it. So, but like, when it comes to your home kit, it's probably the kit you can get the least creative with. You're probably gonna, if you're a Manchester United fan, there's only so many ways they can change a red home jersey without the fan base being like, this doesn't even look like our home jersey. You got to keep it traditional. You got to keep the kit what it is. You can get a little more creative with your away kit, with your change kit, with your second kit or your third kit. I was thinking with the Nashville SC kit that they might get a little bit more creative with it, the next go around, the next time we have the home kit up, which would be, I guess, 2026, if they stick to only changing one kit a year. I think maybe the first couple years they wanted to just kind of establish the brand, be like, gold jersey, gold jersey, gold jersey. Nothing too different, nothing too outside the box, but this is who we are. This is our look. This is our brand, gold jersey. 2026, you might get something a little different. Maybe some stripes, gold and white, like the old NFC kits. I don't know. We'll see. Side note, but that's kind of what I was thinking with Columbus. There's only so many ways you can change a yellow home shirt, a gold home shirt, whatever you want to call it. And adding the Charlie Brown stripe is probably the newest thing they could think of after, because Columbus has been doing it for years. LAFC, same kind of thing. Probably didn't want to change their home kit up too much this early in their existence. Added some, kind of pinstripes in with the gold in there to kind of make it a little different. So I give them credit for that, but it just falls in the good range. So we're going to the meh. New England Revolution. I don't know. Nothing really, that just doesn't really do anything for me. New York City kit, same. Like, just like a black kit. Montreal. This could have almost gone down into fart noise, but the fact that they kind of did like a lightish blue with the stripe, gave it a little bit of more effort. I kept it up there. This next one, St. Louis. Honestly, I probably should have put this in fart noise now I'm looking at it, because it is kind of along the same lines as the Cincinnati and the Toronto kit that I put in the fart noise category. It's just a white shirt, just nothing really else to it. Like, no, maybe if you looked at it up close, maybe there's some subtle designs in the white. I don't know. Austin, same. Just this looks like a practice top more than like an actual game top. Atlanta, this looks like, I've seen other people compare this to other jerseys that have come out over the years. This looks like those plastic, save the environment jerseys that every team wore at a certain point in time. Like, it just looks like a jersey you've seen 100 times over again. Like, nothing to it. Quakes, I maybe could have bumped this one up, because once again, this is kind of along the lines of the Orlando, where it's kind of a throwback jersey with their old logo, paying homage to their past, but it just felt like a little bit more bland than the Orlando jersey, so I dropped it down to meh. Houston, this is one where, like, I always think, like, if you're going for an alternate color on your away kit, you have to be careful to not make it look too much like another team's kit. Like, because if you just put this, like, blindly out there and, like, from a distance, I can't really see what the crest is and everything like that, I would just think this is an Orlando City kit, because it looks like an Orlando City kit from distance. So maybe don't go pure purple when there's like another team that's like distinctly pure purple in the league. Then the bottom one's fart noise. Miami, just centering the logo. I will say this looked better than some of the early leagues. It came out better than I thought, but it's still just like the central logo, just the weird placement of the ad sponsor from Royal Caribbean. Just, it like looks like a rec jersey. There's no other way to say it. Like, it just looks like a rec jersey. It does not look like a professional jersey to me. And then FC Cincinnati and Toronto, both just the most bland white kits you could possibly do. Just like a little bit of piping on the sleeves and everything else just like pure white. Like, Cincinnati should, they got options. Like, they got the blue at home, maybe go orange on the road. I don't know for sure. Toronto, like they've had some like road black kits that have looked solid over the years. Like, just, I say this and I know at some point in time, in the next couple of years, Nashville SC is their new kit's gonna be pure white, and they're gonna go, it's the clean kit, the new clean kit. That's because you gotta have a branding, a name for what the kit is every year. So I'm gonna be flipping out and be like, finally, Nashville SC got their white kit, and here I am dumping all of our teams that went with just plain white kits. But yeah, it's obviously harder if you're gonna go with a white kit. It's harder to get creative and add something to it. But like, you can throw a sash on there, a little bit of piping, a little bit of stripe, something. I don't know. Those two, just like, I look at them and I'm just like, that's just the most bland, nothing happening jersey I've ever seen. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the jerseys. All right, so I think that's gonna wrap this video up. I think we've probably talked more than we should have. Honestly, I do these videos, I'm gonna ramble on these. When I start talking about the team, start talking about this stuff, I'm gonna ramble. So I'm gonna try to wrap up without rambling anymore. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the season. If you're a Nashville SC fan or just an MLS fan in general, what do you think is going to happen this season? What are your predictions? What are your expectations? Throw them down in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what other people think, because once again, I'm just a fan. These are just my random thoughts. I try to be a well-educated fan and follow as much good information from smarter people than me as I can. But I always like to hear what other people think as well. Like I said, we've got some good stuff coming up. If I'm not If I'm rained out from my game I'm supposed to ref Thursday night, the 22nd of February, I may do a live watch along for the Mocha versus Nashville SC CONCACAF Champions Cup match. Friday night, it's a good night that I usually do a lot of live streams. I might do a live stream to actually talk more about the actual game coming up Sunday between Nashville SC and Red Bull New York. And then Sunday, I will be at the game. There will be a live game day vlog coming out of that game. So, non-stop Nashville SC content coming down the pipeline. So if you're somebody who jumped on the channel for Nashville SC stuff, and you've been the last couple months being like, man, these cookie reviews are driving me insane, these Disney trips, why is he always going to Disney World? The stuff you came for is about to be coming fast and furious. Pause. If you're new and you enjoyed what you saw here, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn the bell on for notifications so you get updated when more content like this shows up, or when random other stuff like me going to a bookstore with Nephew P shows up. It's all here. This is a catch-all channel for whatever I feel like doing. So, thank you for watching as always. Appreciate anybody who tunes in, anybody who becomes a part of the conversation, anybody who wants to join along this journey we've been going here on YouTube over the last few years. It's been fun and it's only going to continue. Thank you for watching, and until the next time, enjoy your life.